have a lot of time today. Hello, welcome to the Henry George A. Devotional, episode 55. Wah, wah, wah. I don't have a lot of time today. Well, I guess I could always go late, but whatever. All right. George writes, all trade, let it be remembered, is the exchange of commodities for commodities, and hence the cessation of demand for some commodities, which marks the depression of trade, is really a cessation in the supply of other commodities. This is Book 5, Chapter 1, the primary cause of recurring paroxysms in industrial depression. Um, the dealers dealers find their sales declining and oh yes, we are looking at an analysis of the facts here. That dealers find their sales declining and manufacturers find orders falling off, while the things which they have to sell or stand ready to make are things for which there is yet a widespread desire, simply shows that the supply of other things which in the course of trade would be given for them has declined. Alright, that was a long sentence. So much for going fast. The dealers find their sales declining and manufacturers find orders falling off. Okay. Alright. They find this declining while the things they have to sell or they're about to make are things that there's still a widespread desire for. Simply shows that the supply of other things which in the course of trade would be given for them has declined. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Dealers and folks who know there's a lot of demand for their own goods, yet their sales are going down. George is saying this is showing that the other goods, because trade of goods, must have gone down. Okay. In common parlance, we say that buyers have no money, or that money is becoming scarce. Yeah, they want to buy, but they cannot. But in talking in this way, we ignore the fact that money is but the medium of exchange. Yes, I see your emoji in the chat, table cat. Um, uh, yes, money is but the medium of exchange. What the would-be buyers really lack is not money, but commodities which they can turn into money. What is really becoming scarcer is produce of some sort. The diminution of the effective demand of consumers is therefore but a result of the diminution of production. Ah, yes. That conclusion this is what supports it. But I suspect economists, some would take issue with this. This is seen very clearly by storekeepers in a manufacturing town when the mills are shut down and operatives thrown out of work. It is the cessation of production which deprives the operatives of means to make the purchases they desire, and thus leaves the storekeeper with what, in view of the lessened demand, is a superabundant stock, and forces him to discharge some of his clerks and otherwise reduce his demands. And the cessation of demand, I am speaking, of course, of general cases and not of any alteration in relative demand from such cases as change of fashion. And the cessation of demand, which has left the manufacturer with superabundant stock and compelled him to discharge his hands, must arise in the same way. Somewhere, it may be at the other end of the world, a check in production has produced a check in the demand for consumption. That demand is lessened without want being satisfied shows that production is somewhere checked. Yeah, the assumptions are we assume that people just constantly want things. Somehow production is not flowing smoothly everywhere. Storekeeper. People want the things that the manufacturer makes as much as ever, Just, he's speaking generally here, of course. You could start a business, if you could call it such, that intentionally made things that nobody wanted. Uh, the operatives want the things the storekeeper, just as the operatives want the things the storekeeper has to sell. But they do not have as much to give for them. Production has somewhere been checked, and this reduction in the supply of some things has shown itself in cessation of demand for others, the check propagating itself through the whole framework of industry and exchange. Now, the industrial pyramid manifestly rests on land. Just going to sneak that little sentence in there. The primary and fundamental occupations which create a demand for all others are evidently those which extract wealth from nature, and hence, if we trace from one exchange point to another, and from one occupation to another, this check to production, which shows itself in decreased purchasing power, we must ultimately find it in some obstacle which checks labor in expending itself on land. And that obstacle, it is clear, is the speculative advance in rent or the value of land, which produces the same effects as, in fact it is, a lockout of labor and capital by landowners. This check to production, um, beginning at the basis of interlaced industry, propagates itself from exchange point to exchange point, cessation of supply becoming failure of demand until, so to speak, the whole machine is thrown out of gear and the spectacle is everywhere presented of labor going to waste while laborers suffer from want. Yeah. Uh, I am persuaded of this, so it's like a little hard for me to think of how you could disagree. Um, I suppose you could think that a whole industry sort of just made some bad decisions and went the wrong way, you know. They all thought a whole bunch of people thought it would be good to make, I don't know, like there's two competing new technologies, or but then still it would be the winners and I don't know. It's hard to think of a, like, when Sony makes a good console and Microsoft makes a bad console, uh, you can look at the extra stock of Xboxes and say, um, look, this is happening and it doesn't have anything to do with land, but we are speaking in the general, like the whole of the console and whole of the video game industry. Um, and I guess you could say, yeah, no, it's like that's the whole point. A depression is a generalized phenomenon, and whenever it's yeah. If you try to point at a little like little industries that die out, like you know, horse and buggy died out because the car came along, something like that. You would not speak of the society being in a depression because horse and buggies was as an industry was dying whilst being replaced by the automotive industry. So yeah, I challenge you to come up with a generalized uh, example of a depression being caused by non-land speculation. I don't know. We'll just keep going with George. This strange and unnatural spectacle of large numbers of willing men who cannot find employment is enough to suggest the true cause to whoever can think consecutively. For though custom has dulled us to it, it is a strange and unnatural thing that men who wish to labor in order to satisfy their wants cannot find the opportunity. As, since labor is that which produces wealth, the man who seeks to exchange labor for food, clothing, or any other form of wealth is like one who proposes to give bullion for coin or wheat for flour. We talk about the supply of labor and the demand for labor, but evidently these are only relative terms. Yeah, we've George has written specifically about this idea of supply of labor versus demand for labor and saying they are the same thing. Um, the supply of labor is everywhere the same. Two hands always come into the world with one mouth. 21 boys to every 20 girls. This fact sometimes surprises people, but boys are born more often than girls. And the demand for labor must always exist as long as men want things which labor alone can procure. We talk about the want of work, but evidently it is not work that is short while want continues. Evidently the supply of labor cannot be too great, nor the demand for labor be too small, when people suffer for the lack of things that labor produces. The real trouble must be that supply is somehow prevented from satisfying demand, that somewhere there is an obstacle which prevents labor from producing the things that laborers want. Take the case of any one. I'm looking at how long this is. I don't think I'm going to finish this whole thing, but alright, we'll just keep going a little bit. Take the case of any one of these vast masses of unemployed men to whom, though he never heard of Malthus, it today seems that there are too many people in the world. All right? Somebody, yeah, where's that Monty Python sketch about overpopulation? In his own wants, in the needs of his anxious wife, in the demands of his half cared for, perhaps even hungry and shivering children, there is demand enough for labor, heaven knows. In his own willing bands is the supply. Put him on a solitary island, and though cut off from all the enormous advantages which the cooperation, combination, and machinery of a civilized community give to the productive powers of man, yet his two hands can fill the mouths and keep warm the backs of that depend upon him, were he on a solitary island. Yet, where productive power is at its highest development, they cannot. Yes. The yes, Robinson Crusoe through a Georgist lens. Why? Is it not because in the one case he has access to the material and forces of nature, and in the other this access is denied? Hmm? Is this the explanation for why all of the crafting and farming video games are so popular? Because it is it is the only environment we can like enter into where we're actually getting the full reward of our labor? Hmm? Is it not the fact that labor is thus shut off from nature, which can alone, though, I don't know. I do know some people that may or may not be in the chat, spoiler alert, who aren't that interested in working and gaining more wealth. And while it does appear, I don't know. I don't know. Whatever. Is it not the fact that labor is thus shut off from nature which can alone explain? Okay. Is it not the fact that labor is thus shut off from nature which can alone explain the state of things that compels men to stand idle who would willingly supply their wants by their labor? The proximate cause of enforced idleness with one set of men may be the cessation of demand on the part of other men for the particular things they produce. But trace this cause from point to point, from occupation to occupation, and you will find that enforced idleness in one trade is caused by enforced idleness in another, and that the paralysis which produces dullness in all trades cannot be said to spring from too great a supply of labor or too small a demand for labor, but must proceed from the fact that supply cannot meet demand by producing the things which satisfy want and are the object of labor. Now, what is necessary to enable labor to produce these things is land. When we speak of labor creating wealth, we speak metaphorically. Man creates nothing. The whole human race, were they to labor forever, could not create the tiniest mote that floats in a sunbeam, could not make his rolling sphere one atom heavier or one atom lighter. In producing wealth, labor, with the aid of natural forces, but works up into the forms desired, pre-existing matter, and to produce wealth must therefore have access to this matter and to these forces, that is to say, to land. The land is the source of all wealth. It is the mind from which must be drawn the ore that labor fashions. It is the substance to which labor gives the form. And hence, when labor cannot satisfy its wants, may we not with certainty infer that it can be from no other cause than that labor is denied access to land? I think we'll end there. My final little other comment is something like, I don't know if George talks a lot about services, um, but services would be sort of a direct meeting of the desires of some men, which it's almost like you're laboring and you're not creating wealth, but you're just immediately performing the function of wealth. Wealth, that is to say, as we defined it, as George defined it, is, you know, material or things that can be used to satisfy the desires and wants of men. And so, like, service, acts of service are like directly that. Um, and I wonder, I mean, service as a form of wealth, I think you would want to argue that, like, I don't know. I mean, you're always going to need to perform service on some form of land, right? Because you can't do anything not on land. Yeah, I haven't heard anyone dispute or argue against the importance of land because they're saying it's all, well, have I heard, like, we're such a service-based world. Usually the argument is, land doesn't matter because we're a digitally based world. Um, but I feel like the service industry, and I don't mean like what we mean by the service, I just mean services in general only sort of become a thing perhaps after capital goods have achieved some level of existence or provided. I don't know. Anyway, uh, just interesting to think about services and to try to work it out for myself, how it would fit into George's theory. All right, I will see you next Monday. Bye bye. All right, all right, all right. This is continued. This is since wealth is since wealth is what is traded either as wealth or as capital, it is only a how would it, how to say it succinctly. Um, lack of production somewhere in a society causes dominoes via causing oppression. This seems like it's due to overabundance of either labor or goods, but only when looked at locally, not societally. It's not my most favorite summary I've ever written. Yeah. Assuming desire for wealth is constant, then when goods or labor lie idle, it is a lack of production. A lack of production must be due to land access being denied. Consider a family on a solitary island versus in society being unable to find work. This understanding this requires considering as working through all the interlocking trade that have their ultimate base in the land. All wealth comes from reshaping the land. Man does not create. Alright, good enough. My brain has doubled since the last time we met. This button. Upload video. VLC. Man, you'd think I would be better at this by now. HEDD 55, book 5, chapter 1, continued 1. Okay. I don't know. MP4. Oops, this is chapter 1. Now, no, no. 155. Okay. Alright. I am going to end the stream. See you later.